We're to talk about our classroom number 1 session today. This will be our first TDQB classroom session with you guys. Topic for today is going to be personnel and field zones. So we're talking about offensive personnel and defensive personnel, cover the importance of being able to recognize and understand the strengths and weaknesses in each personnel grouping for both sides of the ball. So as a quarterback, it's imperative that you understand who do you have on the field and what are you trying to accomplish out of that personnel grouping. All right, the reason offenses change personnel groups is obviously they want to have the best players on the field to run the particular package they're working. It also forces the defense to have to match personnel, be able to match alignments, which can give you an advantage if you have better personnel in a particular sub package. All right, so for example, if you have better tight ends and fullbacks than the defense has defensive linemen and linebackers, your team might be heavier in that personnel set because you can create a mismatch with those players on the field. So we'll get started here. Let me share my screen and we'll jump right into it. We're gonna follow along with the PowerPoints and diagrams. Won't go too long today, but just basic stuff. Again, this is day 1, week 1, trying to get a general understanding of what we're working with here, okay? So like I said, TDQB, classroom number 1. You guys should be able to see, follow along with the PowerPoint here as we go through. All right, so the first thing we want to work on is understanding offensively and defensively, what are we working with? So if you look in the personnel chart here, top right corner, we're talking offensive personnel to start. We're going to use a 2-number system to describe our personnel. The first number is going to tell you how many running backs you have in the game. So we say that personnel group, as you see here, we put 10 in, the 1 stands for 1 running back. That second number tells you how many tight ends are coming into the game. So 10 personnel is what we have diagrammed here. You have 1 running back in the game. You have 0 tight ends in. Right, your receivers are typically going to be some combination of an X and a Z on the outside with a Y or an H in the slot. You may see some different letters thrown in there, but understanding exactly what type of player that is. Right? So what we see down here, we have a few other options we can throw in. So let's say we go to 11 personnel. Okay, 11 personnel, most of you guys, you're going to use 11 personnel in high school at some point. So now we're going to have a tight end in the game. All right, if you have a true tight end, he's going to be on the line of scrimmage. Now we have our 1 running back, which is our T, 1 tight end, which is our Y. All right, it puts an extra blocker on the line of scrimmage here, puts an extra offensive player in the box. Right, it also gives us the threat, a hybrid of that tight end being not just a run blocker, but also a pass catcher. Okay, so it's going to help us be a little bit more balanced. We can run or pass equally out of that set. If we want to get to 12 personnel, I'm going to take this U, say I put a double tight end set in the game. He would sub in, the H would come out. All right, now U's on the line, so our X has to back off. And now you can see, now the offensive line has put 2 extra blockers in the game, but still kept 5 legitimate pass catchers on the field as long as those tight ends are capable. What this does to the defense is a couple of things. This formation now has created extra gaps. Right? Think about it, if we take this U and this Y out of the formation here, you've got an A gap, a B gap, and a C gap to both sides. So A is that first gap between the center and the guard. You've got your B gap just outside of that, and then in between the guard and the tackle, and now your C gap outside the tackle. Well, when we bring in this tight end, now we've created a D gap outside of that tight end. So you can see now we have, if you count, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 gaps that the defense has to cover. Most defenses are going to have gap responsibilities, meaning that each defender is responsible for 1 gap. So now that starts to balance things up in the box. Think about, we have 7 gaps. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 defenders. Okay? So we talked about the tackle box. We're talking about this imaginary box, okay, on the outside leg of the tackle, looking at the number of defenders who come in there. Well, like we said, now let's go to this 12 personnel grouping, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, and now we've added another gap. We've added a D gap on the outside to the right. So now the defense has to decide, are we going to play this 2 tight end set where the offense now has 7 blockers on the line of scrimmage? Are we going to play it with our safety deep, Are we going to start to bring that safety down? Do we need to get into a different personnel grouping to match this? How do we as a defense balance up against what the offense is doing? Right? If we were to run it with both tight ends of the same side, right? So you run it with a wing here. Okay, now moves things even a little bit more. X is back on the line of scrimmage. And now, not only do you have the 8 gaps, but now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gaps to the strong side. If you add the Z in, that gives you an extra blocker here, essentially adding a 6th gap outside of him. So that's why we change formations and alignments to force the defense to adjust. Most likely in this type of set, they're going to walk another defender down. They may even bring their safety down and roll their free safety to change the coverage or just allow them to cover the field and be more gap sound in what they're doing. Okay. So example there of our 12 personnel. If we were to go to 20 personnel, okay, now we're going to go 2 running backs and 0 tight ends. So now both these guys are coming out. All right, we put our fullback back in the game, or it can be another tailback. We're going to use the F so that we know it's a different player right now. Okay, we put the H in, and it doesn't have to be in gun. You can see these formations can change all over the place. These guys can be aligned a lot of different ways. But now all of a sudden you have 5 linemen in the box, 2 extra running backs, and a quarterback. So now what you're essentially saying is that, okay, we have 7 blockers and a runner. We have the 5 linemen, 2 potential blockers at running back, and then the quarterback. Okay, the other way you can do it if you don't want to use your quarterback or you want to have both these guys block, so your fullback counts as a blocker, and now the offense can read the D end or the linebacker or one of the defensive players, and now the offense is playing as though they have an extra player in the box because the quarterback is a true runner. So now, since the offense can have 5 linemen blocking, that takes care of the 4 down and one of the linebackers here. Okay, now let's say the fullback is going to lead on the mic. Okay, so now they have 6 blockers for the 6 defensive players in the box, and the tailback can run the ball, and we have what's called a hat for a hat. This is the basic premise of every offensive running play. The goal is to have a hat for a hat. That means that we have 1 offensive player for every defensive player within the box. If they have an extra player down, let's say we were to roll a safety down here. Okay, now this group has 8 guys in the box. All right, well, with this slot here, we should be able to get that guy accounted for. Otherwise, by using quarterback read plays, the quarterback is a runner as opposed to just handing the ball off and setting there. If he's a runner, now we could read somebody, and like I said, we get an extra blocker by reading a person or defender instead of actually physically blocking that player. So this is how we do our offensive personnel. First number is going to be running backs, second number tight ends. Okay, so now we'll go to our defensive personnel. Now, how do we recognize defense? Well, same thing, we're going to use a 2-number system. When we talk defense, the first number now is going to describe the number of defensive linemen in the game. And it's not going to be the number of guys on the line of scrimmage. That's different. That is talking about alignment. We are talking about personnel. So when we say personnel, we want to know what type of players do they have in the game. How many defensive linemen do they have first? Well, in this situation, we have 2 ends. You see our E's are our ends. You have your nose guard, who is the A-gap player. He's typically the run stopper. Then you have your defensive tackle, which is typically a B-gap player, a lot of times playing in a 3 technique. And this is usually ends up being your best interior lineman. The ends, we'll get into it more, but you usually have a rush end, a pass rush end, and an anchor end who's better against the run. And that anchor end usually goes to the strong side where you expect most of the runs to be. So this would be 4. Now, since this is the linebackers, we're always going to have, we go to the strength of the offense first. So we'll go Sam, then the next one over is our Mike, next one is our Will. So anytime you have 3 linebackers in, this would be this 4-3 here we're talking about. 4-3 is going to be 4 D linemen with 3 linebackers behind them. Okay, if we get a sub package in, we could take the Sam out. We could turn this into a nickel. This would be a 4-2. Now, the defense will use different terms for this guy. They might call him a stud. They might call him a nickel. They might call him any number of different things. All right, but that nickel is here. He is now outside the box. They have 4 down linemen in the game, 2 linebackers, and now 5 defensive backs working behind him as we go through here. Okay, so that would be your 4-2. Next example would be our 3-4. Okay, we'll take the nickel out because now we need 4 linebackers again. So we're going to take out this D tackle as well. 3 front, they can align a number of different ways here. Okay, ends are here. Nose inside. We've got 3. Now we're going to take our Sam, put him back in the game. All right, and the defense is going to insert another linebacker. Teams will call him different things. Might be we have the J for the Jack, or we have the B for the Buck. It doesn't particularly matter which one we use. We just have to know he's a linebacker. And now they're going to shift. Jack might go strong side. All right, Mike and Will travel together because they're used to working together. And now you have a 3-4 alignment in the game. Okay, so 3 down linemen, 4 linebackers working behind him. Okay, again, we want to know the personnel is more important than the alignment. They could easily, if we're in, let's say a 21 personnel, tight end and 2 running backs in, they could very easily line up in a 5 front out of this 3-4 personnel. Okay, it might shift these guys in a little bit, but this is still 3-4. This is still a 3-4 personnel group. We have 3 linemen on the field, our end, nose, and end, and then you have 4 linebackers playing behind those guys. Still linebacker personnel. That matters because if we were to try to motion a guy out of the backfield here, this is still going to be a linebacker working out into coverage if he leaves that box. It's not going to be a D lineman. So it's understanding that even though they may be aligned differently, we're still looking at the personnel. Okay, so those are the most common personnel groups you're going to see there offensively and defensively. All right, moving ahead, we're going to do our last thing here. We're talking about the field zones, and this is our building block for understanding how the offense attacks space on the field, how the defense aligns, and where their strengths and weaknesses are. So if you read through at the top, we're going to say we're going to use common terms to identify the field. Okay, it allows clear communication and identification of vulnerabilities on the defense. It's also the #1 rule for passing success. Okay, attack the open space. Don't attack where the defense is aligned. So we'll move down here to the grid system. Most of the guys who've worked with me, you're familiar with how we do this, but we're going to break the field into boxes and zones here. And now based on how the linebackers and defensive backs align, we'll understand where the strength of the defense is and where the weakness of the defense is. Okay, for the terms, you can see the flat, we're going to work from the line of scrimmage up to about 8 to 10 yards. Inside of the flat, you can see now the NFL field is a little bit different in terms of where the numbers are and the hashes, but it's still a good example for us, okay? In between the flat and the tackle box is going to be our curl zone, and then anything inside the tackle box working up to about 7 yards, we call that the hook. So from the inside out, you have the hook, then you have the curl, and then you have the flat working out to the sideline. On the top side, it's going to be mirrored, so we don't need to go through. It's the same thing to both sides of the field. On top of the flat, now we have our fade zone, so that's going to work, again, from about 10 yards up to somewhere in the range of 18 to 22, depending on your offense, depending on where you guys typically target that fade. For this, we've got it drawn up at about 22 yards, at about 18 yards. Then on top of the fade becomes the go. So the go and the fade, we differentiate there because I need to understand, if we're throwing it deep out, we're still attacking that fade zone. If I'm throwing a hole shot versus cover 2, something in between the corner and the safety, that's going to be a fade. A go is going to be the deep vertical shot down the field. That's beyond 20 yards. It changes our trajectory. It changes where we expect to hit that play. Okay, inside of that and running into the middle of the field, you see the seam. Okay, you follow the dashes up. That seam is in between your middle of the field safety and your deep corner. All right, usually working up the hashes, especially in high school, the hashes are a lot wider. It's going to be your seam. As we get to the middle part, you have your hook, that we already covered. On top of the hook, you have your middle, right, which is where typically your curls, your tight end curls, your tight end digs, anything attacking the middle field, your over out's going to cut through there. That's going to work up to about 15 yards. And then on top of that middle area becomes your deep middle. Okay, the deep middle, again, it's separate from the middle of the field because we want to know where are the safeties lined up, right? We want to know how deep are they. Deep middle and middle of the field are 2 different things to me. Okay, Middle of the field, we have different routes to attack that area, and the depth of the safeties will tell us whether or not we can access that area on the field as we go through. All right. So you should be able to screenshot this, guys. As you pause this, go through, you should have these areas memorized. If we go back, why is it important for you to understand what we're doing in this personnel grouping? You need to know in every formation you run how many players you have in the box and how many players the defense needs to have to stop you, right? We want to know the head for a head, the hat for a hat count. You need to know that for any read plays. You need to know it for your run plays. You'll need to know it for your protection, and you're going to have to know it for RPO because you're going to be reading one of those defenders on those concepts. So that's all we're going to cover today. That's our first classroom session there. Update more content as we go on. Appreciate you guys. Love working with you. If you have any questions, you can email me, text me, or put them into the comment box. I'd like to have some continuing commentary with questions from you so that I can answer those right there on our YouTube channel for everybody to see. So until next time, guys, have a great afternoon. All right, make the most of your day. Let's hit our potential every day.